Greetings, and welcome back to the MCOC Encyclopedia. Today we have the May 2024 update to the tier list. 10 new champions to add, some promotions and some demotions too. Please remember that this is just my opinion and you are more than welcome to disagree. Let me know what you think down below, but please, keep it civil. And with that, let's jump in. As a reminder, champions are represented on a grid. Left to right is how often a champion can be at their best, and up and down is how good is that best relative to other champions. So champions in the top right are amazing everywhere, champions in the top left are amazing in very niche circumstances, and champions in the bottom right are bad everywhere. Interactions that may overcharge a certain attacker but are incredibly niche may not be considered in this tier list. For example, Absorbing Man vs Terrax, or Torch vs Mephisto. There's no point cramming a whole bunch of champions in the top left just because they're good in one matchup. In order of release then, first up we have Deathless Guillotine coming in at 7-5. That's 7 often and 5 good. Her kit is very, very similar to regular Guillotine, but before that Guillotine was buffed. This doesn't make her a bad champion by any means, but I think Deathless King Groot, that we'll cover in a bit, is much better. Deathless Guillotine has degen instead of bleeds that the regular Guillotine has, but given that she's based on a very, very old champion, she is quite limited. A very potent heal reversal on the special 2, and some potentially massive damage on the special 3, but that's about it. Unfortunately for her, the synergies that make regular Guillotine much more playable don't apply to Deathless Guillotine, so we can't use those here. A lack of any major immunities, but no required playstyle, places her in the 7 category for how often. Next up, Bullseye, a defender through and through. Personally, I find him quite disappointing on attack, so he has landed in at 7-4. He also has no major immunities, which holds him back from the higher often slots, and he does quite like to be able to bleed the opponent, which is one of the more common immunities in the game. Even with that bleed damage, and despite the fact that he has guaranteed crits across the board, his damage output is still severely lacking, at least by modern champion standards, and he doesn't really do anything. He has access to impact passives, for example increasing block damage, but that doesn't really matter on offense. His guaranteed bleeds when the opponent dexes you doesn't matter on offense. Guaranteed bleeds when the opponent evades you, nice, but you're not going to be bringing him in for an evade matchup because he has True Strike on his special 1, which sure you can get to, but then you aren't getting the extra bleed damage when they evade you. He is purely built as a defender. So, 7-4. In a much better category, White Tiger comes in at 5-8. 5 often, and 8 good. In the right matchup, she can be virtually immortal. Any matchup where she can spam the bleeds from her special 2 can completely shut down any opponent's regeneration and steal it for herself. Very, very potent. Outside of these matchups, she has a couple of different rotations where you can keep going for the special 2s for big damage, or spam special 1s for power control through the fight. High crit rate, access to furies, and power steal all make her a very good champion. She does lack damaging utilities, similar to Bullseye and Deathless Guillotine, but being immune to Nullify is certainly very nice. So, extra points to her there. Next, we have Ironheart, who lands in at 8-7. Thank you to Simula for your thoughts and feedback on her. She has excellent utility, very nice immunities as long as you can hold that armor up buff, and the burst damage on her special 2 is very, very nice. Even in places where you can't get the big burst damage, the damage over time from her ruptures is certainly nothing to scoff at, and simply maintaining those can be another source of damage. Speaking of those rupture debuffs, by default they are incinerates, but with her pre-fight you can swap them out for ruptures, which at least at the moment is a very, very rare immunity to have. She'll struggle slightly against Shruggers, but that's about it. A very powerful champion, and I really hope to see more out of her as we move forward. Next up, Dust, and she comes in at 9-5. Dust can be used pretty much anywhere. A very solid set of immunities, and she doesn't really require the opponent, or herself, to do anything particularly special. Her rotation is fairly flexible, though the usual one you'll want is Special 3, Special 2 spam, and though, like Ironheart, she relies on spamming her own debuffs, in this case her Sandler's debuffs, they get removed and turned into passives anyway, and if the opponent does that automatically, so much the better. A very solid champion? Kind of. Even if you can play her right, the damage output is a little bit lacking for a modern mutant, particularly one stacking so many prowesses, that running the recall masteries can help mitigate this somewhat. Now, the Serpent. Much like Bullseye, a defender through and through, but one with actually much more use on offense, and this lands him at 7/6, though this might change slightly. I want to see some more out of him before I do so, though. A decent set of immunities and utility, and that damage can actually get quite spicy, but it requires a lot of ramp up and longer fights for that to be the case. His extra burst damage on the Special 2 against highly armoured opponents, reminiscent of Venom the Duck's toxic armour, is a very nice addition as well, and an ability I hope we see more of in the future. Again, he needs that ramp up, he needs to get all of his charges and then start generating furies, but when he does, the damage can be very nice. He is a pain on defense, but that is not considered for this tier list, offense only. Next up, the Destroyer, coming in at 9/6. Not the way I would have personally designed the champion, but he is certainly very solid, both on offense and defense, though again, defense not considered here. 9 often, very solid set of immunities, and can be used pretty much anywhere, though not quite everywhere, so he gets a 9. He gets a 6 in overall how good. He has a very solid burst on his Special 2. His ability to remove buffs that are gained when you hit his block is very nice, and that power gain when he reaches 100 destruction charges is also very, very spicy. If you have him awakened, you can actually pause that power gain when you get to Special 3 and keep it going even longer. The burst on the Special 2 being scaled by the degen on the Special 3 is very nice for his rotation as well. Now, Deathless King Groot. In my opinion, definitely a buff over the original, though not a huge amount, so we land him in 8/7. The regen is slightly lower on the Deathless version, but the damage output is much improved, and the fact that the poison is now become an Incinerate on the Special 2 is very nice as well. Incinerate is a much less common immunity than poison. Great immunity and utility, access to lots of buffs and debuffs, and permanent debuffs at that, amazing regen, very high damage output, a very solid character, and an absolute tank as well. Now, the latest champions, Prowler and Spiderpunk. They are both quite new, and as such are subject to movement, but for now, Prowler lands in 9/6. Thank you to Bitter Steel for your thoughts on Prowler. He is an incredibly versatile champion with 2 very nice immunities in the form of Bleed and Incinerate, and a third new immunity, Falter, allowing him to really cover a lot of ground. He also has non-contact attacks, allowing him to bypass a lot of annoying effects. Most of his damage comes from his Special 2 when you've ramped up some Furies, and you can get lots of passive ruptures that are paused during that special, and if the opponent is incinerated, once they expire, they will detonate for even more damage. His rotation is pretty solid, and it can only really be messed up by champions that can't miss, or can't be power drained. Champions that can't be power drained are few and far between, and most of them are the sort of fight you wouldn't want to bring Prowler in for anyway. And any champion that can't miss, again, also quite rare. But actually, this isn't a requirement, it's just a nice opening for him to have in his rotation. You certainly can play him against champions that can't miss. He also has a very interesting form of power control, where the opponents are power locked during their special attacks, and once a special is finished, any remaining power they have is instantly drained away. This, I think, is massively underrated, as if you bait out an opponent's special when they're at quite high bars of power, so sort of 1.8, 1.9, or 2.8, 2.9, you're effectively draining an extra bar of power from them. Their Special 1 nearly costs 2 bars of power, and their Special 2 nearly costs 3. Overall, 9/6, a very solid champion with definite promotion possibilities to 9/7. Lastly, for the new champions, Spider-Punk, coming in at 6/6. And thank you to Misty K for your thoughts on him. Similar to Silk or Mr. Negative, a control-based science champion, but again, we are lacking those immunities that are really needed to help a champion move up in the often category, and he does rely on being able to put debuffs on the opponent very strongly. Without his ruptures, he is a serious noodle. His evade, though, makes him incredibly safe to play, so you can go in and out as much as you want. A great champion to practice intercepting with. As with Prowler, I want to see more out of him. He is subject to movement, but 6/6 for now. Now, some promotions. Nightcrawler has been recently buffed, and so he is moving from 7/3 to 7/5. Possibly 7/6 in the future? We'll see. A lack of immunities means we can't push him much above 7, but he can now put out some serious damage, and his ability to semi-dex pretty much everything as he's dashing backwards is very nice. The fact that it's built into his kit means that he can quote-unquote dex attacks that aren't dexable, because he isn't using the dexterity mastery. He also has the extended dashback window, allowing him to dex even really nasty specials, like MCOC Special 2 for example. Special 1 into Special 2 can put down some really nice damage of his own as well, particularly if you can get the crit on that Special 2. Ant-Man Future, or Future Ant-Man, has been moved from 5/6 to 6/7. The burst on his Special 2 can reach some pretty crazy levels, though his general damage output can be a little bit lacking without this. He is, however, an absolute tank, with his glancing making that even more annoying, and his regen on his awakened ability making him even more annoying. The ability to cap any incoming damage, apart from Special 3s, to 10% is really, really powerful, and then to heal some of that back, even more so. Lastly on our list of promotions, Red Guardian, moving from 8/5 to 8/6, with a very high chance of moving to 8/7 next time. I just want to see him used a little bit more into more endgame content, maybe high tier alliance wars and so on, but he is being used with great effect in Battlegrounds. A lot of the problems he had on his base kit have simply been removed or updated in such a way that he is now significantly more usable for those things. His damage is now excellent, though he does like that high sig. He is a little bit light on the utility, but he does have very easy access to slow on his Special 1, and he is fully buff immune, allowing him to take advantage of situations where buffs come up, in order to build his ablative shield charges. Overall, a very solid buff, some really great damage output, and the possibility to move up in the future. Now for a few demotions. Shuri is being moved from 9/8 to 8/8. She's still a very powerful champion, particularly with the damage over time, and in long form content she absolutely shines, though she can still do very well in shorter form content as well. From Battlegrounds to the Necropolis, she is a very powerful champion. However, 9 to 8 on the often simply due to a lacking immunity. She has one major immunity in the form of shock, but nothing else. Her non-contact attacks can help her get around a few situations where this comes up, but it's not quite enough to warrant the 9, in my opinion. Hulk Immortal is being moved from 7/7 to 7/6. He is still able to dish out a huge amount of damage if the AI plays ball with you. It can be very difficult to maintain that damage in situations, and sometimes it will just fall off because the AI decides to hold block for half a second too long. Gamora is being moved from 9/7 to 7/7 for pretty much the same reason as Shuri. She has no major immunities, meaning to say that she can be used in 90% of matchups. It's not quite accurate, so she's being moved down. Still has very, very high damage output, can bypass miss, and a lot of her own buffs. A really good champion, just not quite in the 9 often. It breaks my heart, but Venompool is being moved from 8/6 to 7/6 for again, pretty much the same reason. Unless he's up against tech champions, he has no major immunities, so we need to take that into consideration. And now 2 champions that are just sort of being moved, neither a promotion nor a demotion, as they're being moved sort of diagonally. Angela is being moved from 8/7 to 9/6. When awakened, she can practically ignore all incoming damaging debuffs, and this makes her very usable right across the board. She's still a very solid champion with good damage output, primarily focused on her basic attacks, and with some synergies she can be pushed further, but no synergies on this chart. White Magneto is being moved from 7-7 to 8-6. Despite being a Magneto, he really doesn't care if he's fighting metal champions or not. Against metal champions, personally, I would take the red Magneto, but in non-metal matchups, if I had to choose one of the Magnetos, he's really not a bad option. Double major immunities as well is very helpful. 8-6. So, there we have the May 2024 tier list update. Do let me know your opinion down below, but please keep it civil. Coming soon, we'll have our next Defender video, and currently Photon is winning the poll, but if you're watching this pretty much as soon as it comes out, it might still be live, so have your say over there. We will also be starting the Act 7 videos fairly soon, but please give me some time to prepare for this. I have some serious work to do before I can start those videos coming out, so again, please just give me some time. In the meantime, I should have some more fun videos coming out. We'll be taking some champions to their absolute extremes and seeing what stupid numbers we can pull out of them. And I do have a few projects in the work as well, which should be quite interesting for everyone. If you have any questions, please do leave them down below. And as always, I have a Discord server, so feel free to join that. It's a great place to get specific advice, make suggestions for future video topics, and while I'm awake, I do my best to be there as much as possible. Thank you, and I will see you next time.